So, here we are, episode 5 of the Me Time podcast. Due to some feedback we got from some friends, we're going to try breaking up the episode today because some people find a 2-hour, 2.5-hour episode a little daunting. But that's all right. So it's good feedback we got. So we're going to try breaking up some topics into smaller portions today.
Bite-sized.
Bite-size, yes. More delicious. So first, we are going to talk about, I think we're just going to talk about some current events today, but first I think we're going to talk about the whole issue that Trump released on Twitter about transgender soldiers no longer being allowed in the military.
In any capacity.
So we wanted to talk about this a bit, and it's obviously a very charged up issue, and there's a lot of stances you could take on it, and I spoke to a lot of people about it, so I think it's worth taking a look at. So we wanted to make sure we got a lot of facts right today for this. So Ches, you said you did some
a little bit of research, a little bit of talking to people in the military, so I can have a nice informed view, unlike many people who are dumbasses and don't.
Did you speak to people from the military?
I've spoken to one or two people, I want to say, via Twitter on the military, and just kind of getting their views on it, because they obviously have more knowledge than I do, because I'm not in the military.
No, that's awesome. I didn't know you did that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it wasn't obviously before this just kind of happened, because I saw...
Well, did you get engaged in a Twitter war?
No, it was actually one of the things where we both were able to have, like, logical, just very sane discussions, because that's, I don't know, how you learn from people.
That's the way it should be?
Yeah, and you shouldn't just be like, nah, I'm right, you're wrong, like most dumbasses are. So like one of my friends retweeted them, and I just kind of replied. I'm like, well, what are your thoughts on like this issue or this? Let's see if I can find it. I have to go all the way.
Well, we could just start by talking about basically how the whole thing was introduced and how the whole thing came out publicly, and then we could just sort of talk about how we feel about it. So the way I understand it was the first time it was announced was through our president's Twitter. Yes. Right? And he released a series of tweets basically saying, maybe could you bring those up? We could read them.
Yeah. I'm actually just going to Google
I forgot to grab an iPad. I meant to grab that.
So yeah, pretty much so I guess the, like how it went out is that I guess initially it had, like a lot of people nervous because his first tweet was, I guess there was like a 10-minute gap between the first tweet and like the second one.
Oh, right, because you could only do 140 characters per tweet, right?
So let's see if I can get, damn it. All right, I'm just going to go through Twitter because it was only like a week ago. So yeah, I guess like the first one was like, after consulting my generals on X, Y, and Z, I have made the decision, ... And apparently, like, people in the Pentagon and the White House were...
Like, what the hell?
Yeah, like, all right. And especially because there was a 10-minute gap, people were like, all right, well, I don't know what is going to be going on.
Right. It could be in regards to any issue, right? Because he didn't really even specify. So...
So after consultation with my generals and military experts, please be advised that the United States government will not accept or allow ... And then there's a 10-minute break, which I guess people in the Pentagon were freaking out about because they didn't know.
Right.
And like, are we going to war with someone? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
So after that, he said transgender individuals. So the government will not accept or allow transgender individuals to serve in any capacity in the U.S. military. Our military must be focused on decisive and overwhelming victory and cannot be burdened with the tremendous medical costs and disruption that transgender in the military would entail. Thank you. That's it.
Wow.
So essentially not able to serve in any capacity because of the medical costs and disruption that it would entail.
I'll just say, for my first reaction off reading that, it sounds extremely discriminatory. Sounds like he's picking out a group of people and saying they cannot participate in the army, in the military, which is like ridiculously courageous to do. But then I did do a little research on it because I thought to myself, like, there has to be like something behind that. It cannot be truly just like.
Well, it wasn't like that's what he qualified. He's like, it's not just that they can't serve; it's because of military costs and disruption.
Right.
So it's not like you're just saying no, you can't serve. Like, before when we'd have like racist laws of like black people can't sit here because they're black.
Right, and so say that again. He said
because of the medical costs and
yeah.
and because of disruption to the military.
Okay.
Which, I mean, granted, disruption to the military is a very vague term that can be kind of used for however you want to entail it.
So the medical costs thing, that one,
it's bullshit.
Yeah.
Like, they had a RAND study that the medical costs, I think, is anywhere of like I want to say the numbers are like 0.03 to like 0.1%.
Yes.
Of like, and I'm not sure if it was all the general medical costs like transition surgeries, hormone replacement therapies, estrogen, like hormonal blockers and things like that. But I know that the medical cost was relatively low, like 0.03 to 0.14% of the military budget.
So what I want to look up, and maybe you know this, otherwise I'm just going to Google it real quick, is what percentage of the military is transgender? Because I feel like that it would be minuscule, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's super small.
So that's what I want to know. Are you searching that?
Yeah.
Because that I feel like would play a big role in why he would even release that. Like my guess, let me take a guess. I want to guess it's under 1% of the military.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, the amount of transgender. So, yeah. Let's see if we can pull it up. I know it's very small.
Right. So that begs the question of like, what could the medical costs truly be? And where are the medical costs coming from? Which I did a little bit of research on.
Yeah. So, according to the 2016 study, which I was basing my numbers off, transgender-related healthcare for active duty military would cost $2.4 to $8.4 million.
Okay.
In 2014, the Pentagon spent $6.27 billion on healthcare costs for all active duty. So that's
ridiculously small.
Yeah. So we can. Yeah. I don't even want to put that in because that just wastes time punching in numbers. But 2.4 million out of 6.27 billion. Even if you want to go the high end of 8.4 million.
Yeah. And
out of 6.27 billion is absurd considering a billion is 1,000 million.
Right.
So you have essentially 6,000. No, like some absurd amount.
Yeah.
It's like that 0.03 to 0.1%.
So we're talking about a really small sample of the population of active military members, and then medical costs and he said something overwhelming
and general like dysfunction of the military,
something like that. All right, so the medical costs. So where are these medical costs coming from? I understand that military members, if they need work-related. Go ahead.
A 2014 study estimated that 15,500 trans people were currently serving in the U.S. military.
Say that number again.
15,500. And there's currently 1.3 million active duty and an additional 800,000 in reserve. So you figure 2.1 million active duty and reserves are currently enlisted, and 15,500 are transgender.
So 2.1.
Nope, so do 15,500 divided by 2.1 million.
Yeah, we're talking about 0.007.
Is the number?
Yep.
So it's 0.7%.
Yeah.
So it's less than 1% of the military is transgender.
Okay. So then that begs the question. Fine, let's play along with that, right? Let's say there are tremendous medical costs, but what are the medical costs?
Essentially, based on what I can assume, it would be transition surgery,
right?
Which is multiple surgeries, and then you have the chronic long-term hormone, either hormone replacement or hormonal supplements for those transgender surgeries.
So here's where I might split off from popular opinion. Why is the military responsible for paying for transitional surgeries for transgender soldiers?
Well, if they serve, it's the military having experience with the VA. The military covers a lot of stuff for things that soldiers don't incur in battle. So like if you go to if you're just from what I've experienced with friends that have done rotations in the VA. So even if you're you serve when you're 60 years old and you have cancer, the VA covers all that pro bono because you served.
Because you served,
right? And
you're not even active anymore.
Right.
So like things like cancer, or say like what if a soldier was out of the military, did his time, and then like tore a rotator cuff and needed like like rotator cuff surgery or something?
That I'm not positive on, just because I don't know like the full complexities of the medical insurance, but I know that the VA does supply like some sort of their own, like their own insurance.
Supplemental insurance.
Right. So it might be like how most insurance is now, where they'll cover 80% and then the extra 20% is on you.
Okay. So, well, that makes sense.
And I know that they do have, it's called like Tricor insurance, which is like some of the best out there, which I do think is similar. So I'm sure that since they're saying it's the best out there, I'm assuming it's going to cover a lot of conditions that aren't usually covered. And then like the copays and premiums and deductibles and all that are super low. Mm-hmm. So it's essentially government subsidized healthcare for soldiers.
Okay. So then, but cancer and transitional surgery, I view on two very different levels, right? Because I feel like cancer, you get without, trying isn't the right word, but you just get cancer and it's like unexpected.
Okay, but what if you smoke?
It is life threatening. Yeah. Well, if you smoke, you
get cancer.
The consequences that come along with it. Mm-hmm. But what I'm saying is, I view cancer almost as like, it's just different than, I understand like transitional surgery is like necessary for people who feel like they need it and stuff, but it seems weird to me that the military is responsible for covering that. I feel like it is almost completely unrelated to their job or their past job as serving.
But so is cancer. It's completely unrelated to it. It's one of those things that's like you served, so you're taken care of.
But I guess the difference is when you have cancer, you are making a proactive decision to try to get rid of it because it's life-threatening.
Right.
And when you're transitioning, when you need going through transitional things like the hormone therapy or surgeries and stuff, that's not a life-threatening thing. So it
could be, considering that 40% of trans people commit suicide.
Really?
Yeah. So you look at something like it's like prostate cancer, which I'm not
40%?
Yeah.
Holy hell.
Which is a reason that, so I think depending, like there should be certain qualifications, like how we talked, there are certain medical conditions that can exclude you from the military. Yeah. I think transgender people should be allowed to serve if they want to. Like, fuck, I don't care.
Sure.
If they want to serve, by all means, let them.
Sure.
But there should be certain qualifications based on like medical necessity. So like how, like with that, when I was talking with the active duty person on Twitter, he was saying that depending on where you're stationed at and like what your job is, you may not have consistent access to the meds that you need, which is why like some people like diabetics and asthmatics and things like that aren't usually, or like people with like hypothyroidism, like something that needs chronic medical care can either get you completely not allowed to enlist, or you might have like certain deployed conditions, because say if you are a transgender male, so female to male, have your transitional surgery, you now need chronic long-term use of like testosterone and other hormones to kind of supplement yourself.
Right.
And if you are doing like a black ops mission or secret ops, something like, I don't know, whatever it's called,
right,
where you may not have either constant access to those things, because I mean it's not like you can be,
because you could be out in the field for months at a time or something,
and it's not like you can get things airdropped to you where you're going to reveal your position. That could be like certain things that prevent you from getting those hormones. And it's not like a multivitamin where you miss like 2 days, you're fine. Like those hormones have a big effect on your they can have a big effect on your physical functioning as well as your cognitive
so if you're not getting your testosterone, for example, it might throw off how you're viewing situations,
right,
and it might like affect not only you but people around you.
Exactly. So like, and I mean it's one of those things where people can say like, oh well, just say if you're going on like a suspected 1 month mission, just to be sure, why don't we give them 2 or 3 months, so that way if it does go long they have extras. But there is always the possibility that like ambushes happen, and it's not like you can say, oh well, before I escape I'm going to go make sure I have all my testosterone and other meds that I need. It's, you have to get the fuck out. So I think that, I don't want to say that transgender people shouldn't be able to serve, because they should, but there are like these certain qualifications that I think do have to be taken into account before you're making these large, overwhelming decisions.
Yeah. No, that was well put. So I guess it makes sense now, but like when I first heard that, I was like, I think if you're brave enough to serve in the military, like fucking A, right, go for it.
Go 100%. I don't want to, and I have no desire to. If you want to, by all means, I commend you.
Definitely. But you're saying now you're taking care of vets who, like you said, have cancer or whatever. So that does kind of fall in the same category then, especially as like an overall medical well-being.
Yeah.
Of taking care of them, and it's like just such a small percent. Like is testosterone or I don't really know enough about the chemicals. Like I keep going back to testosterone, but
like estrogen, anything like that, progesterone, things like that. I mean,
is that really expensive shit to produce?
I have no idea. I haven't looked into it, but I mean, I know that like the common thing is like, oh, we spent X amount on Viagra, but we can't pay for like testosterone, which makes sense, but it's not like there's more use to Viagra than just like getting a boner. Like if you have someone who serves, say like a 26-year-old vet who comes back and he has like psychogenic difficulties of like getting an erection and having sex with his wife and propagating a family, that's not just like, oh, I want Viagra so I can just like fuck anyone. It's like there's like a psychogenic condition behind it because of you serve.
It may have to do with like PTSD.
Right, exactly. And that has long-term effects, not just of him being intimate with his wife, which can have like marital effects, but also like him having a family, which can have more long drawn out psychological effects. So I think that being like, oh, well, we can pay for Viagra, why can't we do this? And like, I get it, but the rationale of why they're saying it is kind of like short-sighted. It's just like that emotion, like that quick emotional, like, oh, we can do this, so why not that?
Yeah. And
they're kind of not looking at the full spectrum of ideology behind it and like the other possible drawbacks and benefits and things like that.
Yeah, it sort of starts with an issue and then it could just sort of spiral outward.
Yeah.
Like it could just start with that one thing, but you're right, like something like that could affect mental health and family well-being and
right. And I mean, if you look at it, it's like, again, I'm not saying we shouldn't let trans people serve, but the fact that there's already a 40% suicide rate, why
in the general population,
right? And I don't want to say like why would they serve, but how smart is it to take an largely at risk, like highest suicide rates of any population,
totally,
and put them in a position which is very likely to cause PTSD and other psychological problems, and lead to an even higher suicide rate. And I don't say that so that they shouldn't serve, but I don't want people to kill themselves. Like,
absolutely,
I get the ideology of wanting to serve and all that, but I mean, I also don't want people to kill themselves. Like,
take it. I bet you there's something about like emotional disorder, right? Like I bet people with emotional disorders, diagnosed emotional disorders, are discouraged or probably can't even serve in the military.
Let's pull that up because I do remember seeing that as one of my screenshots.
So that's just something I'm thinking of. If you wouldn't want to that's kind of setting people up almost for failure.
Yeah. So psychotic and this is from the USA.army.mil. I'm assuming since it has the MIL following, it's an official military website. Psychotic and bipolar disorders are disqualifying for deployment. Individual assessment required. For detailed guidance on deployment limiting psychotic conditions or psychotropic medications, refer to the Health Affairs Policy Memorandum. Clinical psychiatric disorders with residual symptoms or medication side effects which impair duty performance. Mental health conditions that pose a substantial risk for deterioration and/or recurrence of impairing symptoms in the deployed environment, and history of psychiatric hospitalization, suicide attempt, substance abuse, or treatment for such abuse are all disqualifying conditions.
Right. So it's not like you're zeroing in on somebody's like being transgender. That it's just like because of these reasons. Here's a list of other people.
Yeah. So it's not just
shouldn't really be in there.
People, but it's like anyone that has like psychiatric conditions, which not. I have to phrase this because you can be construed as transphobic. Not that to say that all trans people have psychiatric conditions, but they have gender identity dysphoria, like whatever you want to call it, whatever the new term is for it. But it is a psychiatric condition where there's like a like a relay thing of like how you like a perceptual disorder.
Sure.
Of like your brain thinks one thing, but it can't like align what it thinks and what it sees, which can not just for trans people, but any people that have like some sort of perceptual disorder like that are barred from the military.
Totally.
And the fact that like just because you want to like I think that it was singled out as trans people was super wrong, because if they want to serve they should, but there are these other things to take into account before you make these decisions. And it's such like an emotionally charged thing where people see that and they're like, no, like that's just wrong. And then if you try to bring up these issues, you're like a transphobe or you're homophobe or anything like this. It's, no, it's not. This is how it is. Like the U.S. Army isn't an equal opportunity employer. Like I said, people with asthma, people with diabetes can't serve. Any other sort of like endocrine disorders like hyperparathyroidism, they're not allowed to serve. But
I think people kind of hyper focus in on one issue of, because like I would say, without a doubt, most people, at least in our age, are like anti-discrimination. No, just anti-discrimination.
Well, that can lead on to a whole other thing whereby being anti-discrimination, you're actually very discriminatory.
Right. Well, that's why there was such a big uproar when this happened. So people's intentions are right in saying like, hey, if that's bullshit, if that person wants to serve in the military, but then you got to consider like it's almost, and this is coming from the other viewpoint, it's not like they're focusing in on this one thing, because you could say that about just every other kind of disorder. I think like it's like you don't want to set them up for failure is what I'm trying to say. Like if you know that there's a history of psychological or suicidal thoughts that go along with being transgender, it might be worth considering. Of
maybe like not just saying like that they can't serve, but they require further psychiatric evaluation, because if they already are opposing like these suicidal ideologies, don't put them in that environment to where it can only increase that risk.
But here we go. Devil's advocate. What if I'm going to pretend I'm a transgender soldier who wants to serve? We'll be like, you said like don't put him in that situation. Be like, nobody's putting me in that situation. I want to serve.
Right, but that's why I'm saying but if you're already showing like suicidal ideologies and suicidal tendencies, no.
Oh yeah, if you're already showing
but I mean if
you've had a clean history of nothing like that, then
by all means go ahead.
Yeah.
But then that all, like I said, but there could, and I think should be, qualifications of where and how you serve.
Yeah.
Like if you want to be like, I want to be like special ops, like Green Beret, doing like like all these secret operations, I'm going to say,
maybe not.
Probably not. And it's not because I think that you're generally inferior because you're transgender, but there are other things to take into account where, granted, the odds might be small that you're ambushed, which I don't think the odds are that small actually, but the odds may be small, but that's not a risk I'm willing to take with not just your life, but the 8 or 10 other people who you are serving with, because shit happens. Like when they did that special ops in, where was it? It was like one of the Gulf Coast countries, and like a chopper went down, and like the whole mission was essentially compromised, and someone died and the chopper crashed. Like shit happens. You have to plan for that. And it's not that I think,
especially in an
unknown environment like that, where you don't know where terrorists are hiding in the mountains, because that's their territory. They know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So it's not like, by saying that, it's not like I'm saying transgender people shouldn't serve, but there are other things to take into account. And it's just like if the president were to say like diabetics shouldn't be able to serve, people would be like, oh yeah, I can see that, like if they're doing something in the hot sun, it's a lot easier for them to have a hypoglycemic incident. It's given like the unstableness of the power out there, the insulin, which has to be refrigerated, could go out. Like I can understand that, but as soon as you go to like a hot topic issue like transgender, it's like people get so emotionally charged and completely overlook all these underlying rationales.
No, I agree. So in a perfect world, here's how we would handle it, according to Eric Chesnewski, Dr. Eric Chesnewski. We would pre-screen transgender applicants to the military to see if they had any history of psychological mishaps, suicidal thoughts, things like that. If they have, and struggle psychologically, then it would be a no. Most of the time.
To be deployed overseas, I would say, like, if you still want to do something with like IT or work in like the medical field when they come back, all for it.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
Or even if they want to be deployed overseas and work on like a main stable base over like, which I don't want to say like isn't at risk of getting attacked, but I mean
it's less at risk.
Yeah, and it's like one of those things where it's more stable. It's like you go, I don't know, like the bigger bases which are more secure. By all means, like if you want to do something like that,
okay,
like an engineer, something like that, where you're working on tanks and airplanes and all that, I'm cool with it. Yeah. I just don't want to be like in the possibility of being in a combat zone of where like all those things that we just talked about are a possibility. And it's also kind of weird if I don't think, which could again be transphobic, but I don't think you should be allowed to transition while you're active duty.
I would agree with that.
Because like I was reading something that we have like 55,000 people that are not deployable, and that's broken up into either like 0 to 30 days not deployable, like 30 to a year, and then just not deployable at all.
Deployable meaning?
Like they can't go over, like say like if you tear your ACL or tear your rotator cuff, you're technically not deployable.
Okay.
And I don't think that...
Because there's something inhibiting you
from serving,
from
right.
giving your best performance.
Right, because like if you have surgery, you have to go like rehab and all these, like you have to acclimate to the different hormones that you're on.
Yeah.
And again, it's a small number. I think the numbers I saw from that RAND report were like 20 to 100, which granted, very small. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that we should add to that non-deployable number, because the RAND report said that's already a pretty high amount compared to other militaries. Mm-hmm. And you figure if you sign like a 3 to 5 year contract, the numbers I was seeing, which is hard to find online, I couldn't, but I was between the two military people that I saw post about it, the length of time you're not deployable for if you're transitioning is 2 to 4 years. So if you sign up for a 3 to 5 year contract, which I think most are 5, like 5 or 6, I want to say, 2 to 4 years out of that is essentially what, 80 to a third, like 80% to like 2/3 of your service is going to be not doing it. It's going to be in that transitional care where
totally.
But I mean, again, like if you are transgender, you want to serve, once you go through like your service, your contract is up, you're no longer like on deployment, and you want the transitional surgery, cool, you served, you're more
on the military's dime.
Yeah. Okay. Or again, like on like that, on their
insurance.
Right.
So they would, like 80, they might get
like
help
80-20, yeah.
with it. Okay.
80-20%, however it works out.
That's, I don't know. See, it's difficult for me to agree with that completely, because at that point they've done their 5-year contract, right? Mm-hmm. No problems. They've done everything they needed to do. Mm-hmm. They're now out of the military.
Right.
They just did 5 years in and out. They're like, I did my time. Now I want my transitional surgery. Mm-hmm. That's still very different for me. So take that scenario I just described, and then let's take a scenario of somebody who's just, strictly male, and gets out and contracts lung cancer.
Right.
Not lung. Well, let's get rid of smoking. Let's make it very simple.
Like a stroke.
Yeah, a stroke or something. Mm-hmm. I feel like those are just two different things, because...
But a stroke is different than cancer. Cancer is different than an ACL surgery.
It is, but
an ACL surgery is different than going to get like general meds.
So wait, I think I just figured it out in my head. So I'm trying to compare like a medical surgery to like a transitional surgery. Let's pretend we're comparing.
But now you're going under the assumption that the transitional surgery isn't medical. If we're going to say that it's a psychiatric condition, that transitional care, and the documentaries I've seen, it doesn't completely negate their feelings of like, not those suicidal feelings, but it doesn't necessarily negate like the psychological effects, but it could have like some sort of medical effect on the individual.
In what kind of?
Well, it's like the sensory. It's like, why does anyone transition? It's because it kind of helps align those two worldviews of what they see and what they feel.
So it would be more of a psychiatric condition, though.
Well, yeah. From everything I've seen and from the thing I read on Reddit from like a person who claimed that they were transgender, obviously anyone can post. It's like I forgot what the old term was, like gender dysphoria, which I don't think is like correct anymore. It's like gender identification disorder or something like that.
You could say it with the intention of just getting the point across.
Right. So like say like they have a gender identity disorder. It is.
Yeah. Also,
it's not like a transgender person is just like, oh, man, I would like to be a female. It's like a mental illness of where their brain perceives something and which is contrary to everything in the physical realm.
So you're saying the surgery might manifest. The person wanting to transition may be manifesting itself in a way that it becomes a medical condition.
Well, it already is. It's like a transgender person has technically a psychiatric condition, gender identification disorder. And so similar to how, like if you have Parkinson's and you can get, it's called deep brain stimulation, where you get something implanted into your brain to stimulate to release dopamine, that medical surgery can help alleviate some of the dysfunction that someone with Parkinson's feels. Mm-hmm. So likewise, the transitional surgery could help alleviate some of that dysfunction that they feel, because what they're seeing and what they're perceiving are different.
Okay.
So like, I perceive myself to be a female, but what I see is a male. Whereas if I perceive myself to be a female and I see myself as a female, it could help alleviate some of that, like, kind of like that angst.
Okay. It may straighten out your perception.
A little bit, yeah.
A bit. Okay.
I won't say 100% because I do think
help.
that, yeah, right. And I do think that there is other psychiatric care that is needed to see, like a psychiatrist or something like that.
Okay. So I think I need to stop thinking about it as like a strictly like cancer versus transitional surgery. I think I need to view it as like on the same level as like treating a soldier for PTSD.
Right.
Because
exactly.
that's like a psychiatric or like what's another word for it? Like psychological disorder that happens, you know, maybe
which a person has no control over. It just
right. And so
or like being born with like having like some sort of like tendency towards depression. Like it's not like someone wakes up and is like, you know, I feel like being depressed today.
Right.
And that's what I see people be like, oh yeah, they just want to be a female. And it's like,
it's a lot more than
right.
that.
It's like, I mean, yes, but it's not it's not like I just woke up one day and was like, I feel like being a female today. I'm going to go get a surgery. Like that's a big life decision.
For sure.
And it's not just like something you wake up and have. It's like a inbred like disorder where like the Vice documentary I watched, it was a boy who was 4 or 5. And the person interviewing was like, well, when did you know that you were female?
You said 4 or 5?
4 or 5.
Okay. And
I mean, this is kind of going down a rabbit hole, but she was like, well, when did you know that when did you think you were a girl? And I'll call it boy because it's a boy, said like, I've thought I was a girl my whole life. Like even before I could talk, my mom would dress me as a boy and I just didn't like it. Like I wanted to be dressed up as a girl. Mm-hmm. And then same thing, they interviewed, I want to say, she was right around puberty age, so I want to say
it's like teenager.
Yeah, like a teenager, and it was like the same thing. It's like I've always just felt like I should have been a boy, and she was a twin. Which is I don't know how that works out with the whole genetic stuff, which is why it's like a genetic, like psychiatric condition. Mm-hmm. And she was like, I've always just felt like I should have been a boy. Like even when I was young, I wanted to be a boy. I always wanted my hair short and things like that. So it's not like something that you just wake up and it's like, oh, I want to be a boy.
Okay.
It's like something that is deep down, like ingrained, which
yeah.
is why I'm not nervous or afraid to call it a psychological condition because it's something that they're born with.
Yeah. So we need to stop viewing it as anything else. We need to start viewing it on the same level as like, if we're not going to help transgender soldiers like transition, then we like shouldn't treat people with PTSD.
Right.
Or we shouldn't treat people that have like depression.
Right.
And treat them like after their military time, after they've served.
Right.
Because otherwise you'd have to take care of that on your own. Mm-hmm. So, okay. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, that
seems pretty cut and dry.
Yeah, and like I said, like it's such an emotionally charged topic, which whenever you're doing things based on an emotional level, you're not going to think rationally, which is why, like when I saw one of my buddies retweet someone, oh man, I'll see if I can find his tweet. Like when I saw him tweet, like when I saw the military service guy tweet out, I'm like, okay, I want to know what his thinking is because I saw that he was active duty and he has more insight and information on this than I do.
Right.
Which is why I wanted to just learn more because I wanted to have a well-informed viewpoint on it. Okay, so he said, so I think I have to go a little bit further back. Maybe not. Yeah, so he was like, I think that they should be able to serve. Yeah, I mean, he pretty much said the same thing. Like, he shared the same thing over that I was saying.
Take a minute to find it because I think that's interesting. I think people might want to hear that.
Let's see. When was this from? 7/26. So I'll scroll through. Here we go. Okay, so he said, as a soldier, I firmly believe the trans people are fully capable of serving in all branches of the military without issue. However, I more firmly believe that military funds have no place of being allocated to aid their gender transitions in any shape or form, which I kind of poked at that a little bit. And I'm like, well, you said any shape or form, but then later he clarified saying like while they're serving because the 2 to 4 year non-deployable part. Mm-hmm. But he was like, after they serve, by all means, they should. And I'm like, all right, I can 100% agree with that because for all the reasons that we just talked about.
Yeah, so to recap, at least after this conversation, I kind of came in thinking why is the military really responsible for doing it? But I think an important point to acknowledge is, like, if you're going to be taking care of people with depression, with PTSD.
Or, I mean, even regardless of that, even like if they're going to be taking care of anyone who has some sort of
let's not even psychological. Like, let's say
like a stroke, say like 40 years after they serve, or there was someone who served and while he was and then ended up being incarcerated, and I think he was stabbed or hit in the back with a chair, and had a spinal cord injury, and he can still go, like, completely unrelated to
duty.
Unrelated to duty, he was still able to get medical care from the VA.
Yeah, because if you're willing to put your life on the line like that for a certain amount of time, and probably the more, I'm kind of speculating, but probably the more time you serve, the better medical care you get.
I
don't know about that, but either regardless, if you put your life on the line like that, you should really kind of be taken care of, regardless of the issue.
Yeah, and like that's why, like, when the one person said, like, oh, you really think all your ideas well thought out, and I'm like, yeah, I don't base on emotion, because initially I'm like, yeah, they should be able to serve, but I don't think we should cover their transitional care because that's like something that most insurances don't cover.
I viewed it more as, like, sorry to cut you off, like more as like a personal like decision
thing that they wanted, instead of like something
like a want rather than a need.
Yeah, and I mean, it's hard to say it's a need, but I think it is. I think it, on the spectrum of want and need, it errs more towards need than a want.
It's funny you said that. I was just thinking that in my head, like that same sentence.
Yeah. But like initially, like when I heard it, like I said, like I thought trans people should be able to serve. I mean, they have more balls than I do. But I don't know if we should cover the transitional surgery because most other insurances don't. And then I thought about, and just like knowing what I know from the VA, I'm like, well, the VA and like the at least from like the rehab side, covers a lot of things that most insurances don't. And I'm like, they served, they deserve more love and more treatment than most other people do. Mm-hmm. So
cool. I think that might be a good place to leave it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, cool.
You got 41. We're right on time.
Not too bad. All right, guys. This was our short
first
condensed version. Because if we would have kept going, we would have been talking about aliens and wormholes.
Right,
at this point.
And we would have been like an hour later, and everyone would have tuned out by then. So yeah, this worked out well, I think.
I'm gonna say this too, if you guys want to chime in on this video, they're up on YouTube. We're gonna try to get them up on a podcast. We put them up on Facebook. If you agree or disagree with anything we had to say, I know I would be very willing to talk it out.
Yeah, I would love to hear. Like I said, I like hearing other viewpoints, but just make sure they're rational. Don't be a dumbass.
So feel free to comment or anything like that. And moving on to the next one.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.